5, 4, 3. No, okay.
Yep, we're live right now.
Awesome.
All right, I wanted to welcome everyone to our live webinar, CAP 21, live webinar with some youth in Paris. And we have some youth here that are joining us, two youth, one student that's from School of Environmental Studies in Minnesota, and Maria with Sustain Us. And then we have some folks here live from Minneapolis with youth environmental activists in Minnesota. And those of you who are joining us live, we want to welcome you all too. And we want to get started by introducing our guest speakers and then hearing about their experiences and what they're up to. And we also have time on this live webinar to also do some Q&A and some conversation back and forth with one another. And so we will be taking questions on the sidebar for those who are streaming in, if you are, or as they join on. So yeah, feel free to put your questions on the sidebar. But yeah, let's turn it over to you all. Let's start with Maria, and then let's go to Philson. Philson, if you want to mute yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Maria, as Nicole said, and I'm very excited to be part of this conversation. It's awesome to be able to connect back with Minnesota while in Paris, and it often seems very far away, and hearing what's happening back in Minnesota is both exciting and challenging. Yeah, because I've been here for almost 3 weeks now. So yeah, I work with a group called Sustain Us, which is a national organization here in the U.S. That works with youth between the ages of 14 and 30 to engage with sustainable development and sustainability and justice in some fashion. And it's really broad, and what the most specific and I think effective thing that we've done over the course of our being as an organization is engage with the UN processes and specifically with COP 21 this year and the COP process for the last 10 years. So we show up at the negotiations, we work through a lot of different avenues to create change within the UN process. So doing media work, producing op-eds, doing direct action, and thinking about how actions and mobilizations fit into creating change, and then also doing the more traditional direct advocacy work and engaging with negotiators, engaging with other stakeholders in the process. So a really holistic way of approaching the negotiations, and I can get more into our strategy and what we're looking at in a few minutes. Also, for like both of us, just so you know, I know it was mentioned before, but it's like 12 o'clock here, so some leeway on answers would be lovely.
Awesome. Thanks, Maria. I'm going to turn it over to Philson if you want to introduce yourself, more of where you're coming from, and yeah, what you're doing there and what's been happening in your world.
Hi guys, so I go to the School of Environmental Studies, which is in Apple Valley, Minnesota. It's a junior and senior high school, and what happened was that our teacher, Craig Johnson, has been doing this since Copenhagen in 2009. So what he does is that he goes to each senior who turns 18 before November 30th, and then he offers this opportunity to go and attend these COP conferences, and since he's done this since 2009 and I turned 18 October 30th, I was just like, why not, you know? It was a really tough and hard, I would say hard process, because the United Nations only gave us like 4 passes, and there was like, I believe 10 of us that wanted to go. So after we had to write like a whole bunch of essays and get interviewed by our foundation, which we got accredited from, and all our teachers had to interview us. We had to be like really like friendly with the principal, kind of, you know, so that we could be able to go. And now, unfortunately, due to the Paris attacks, my teacher can't come with us because the district kind of like did not want it to be academic or school sanctioned, because if it is school sanctioned, then they're liable in every way. So he couldn't go, but we could go as like a vacation. So that's why. So us four or five of us are here. We have 4 passes. So there's 3 of us that are in the blue zone for like 2 weeks, and then one of us is going 1 week, and then another one's gonna go the other week. But yeah, so far Paris has been great. I mean, a lot of the COP conferences is really interesting, especially like the youth. The youth have such a great impact here that like it's just unbelievable how much they're being listened to and stuff.
Yeah, Philson, thanks for talking about youth and getting us started to think about the youth presence and the purpose that youth are, the purpose of youth being at COP21. And I would love to hear from you a little bit about what are those powerful ways that youth are influencing the COP negotiations that are happening right now, and what have you been experiencing?
So things that I've noticed is that what the youth would do at COP was that they would either like kind of protest or like talk about. I know I saw like a few these 2 days, and I think Maria can talk more about that. Youngo has a great presence here, and it's just really very fascinating to see. I go to their exhibits all the time because they're so cool. Um, right now, sitting across from me is like the youth coalition from the Sierra Club, which is pretty awesome. And yeah, I mean, they have such a great presence here. It's just amazing. I mean, my teacher talked about t-shirts that were in Copenhagen from the youth that they wore, which is how old will you be in 2050? Had like a great kind of message to send to old politicians and stuff like that. It was really great.
Maria, do you want to give some voice to some of the youth perspective and some of your experience
I think
working with youth being
one of the very specific things I want to talk about is an action that happened just yesterday, and so Sustain Us, along with some of the other youth groups in Youngo, which was a group that Susan just mentioned. Youngo is the official youth constituency within the UN, so it's supposed to bring together youth voices from around the world and give them a place to be collaborating and have a more formal entity that represents them. So Youngo is essentially a loose coalition of youth organizations at the UN. And so we planned this action through Youngo that was about specifically one of our main priorities within our delegation, which is complete decarbonization and zero emissions by 2050. So no emissions by 2050 and a transition to 100% renewable energy, and doing that explicitly in a just way that is empowering communities, that is recognizing different needs of communities, and is really being done in a way that is just and equitable, both on a local level, on a national level, on an international level. So this action main points the 0 by 2050, 100% renewables, and just transition, and also keeping beneath 1.5 degrees of warming, which is a lower number than what a lot of groups will talk about, but is also one that is agreed upon by a lot of groups that are island nations, that are youth, that are on the more progressive left flank of organizing here. Anyway, so this action, getting to what actually happened, there's an action that happened yesterday that was youth specifically standing in solidarity with this group of countries that is called the Climate Vulnerable Forum. It's a group of about 100 countries who are most susceptible to the impacts of climate change. And they came out with a statement as this vulnerable forum. They had a statement about these very similar ideas of decarbonization by 2050, of needing to have renewables and do that in just way. All those points were in this huge, formal, monumental piece that this coalition put out earlier this week. And as youth, we thought it was very important to be recognizing how big of a moment this was for these countries to be coming forward in front of the UN and saying this is what collectively we're standing behind. And so as youth, we did an action that was just about standing in solidarity with those groups and really recognizing the need to stay beneath 1.5 degrees of warming, and the only way we're going to do that is decarbonization by 2050. So really powerful action. There's a lot of media there. It was essentially just some nice banners and speakers from youth from countries most vulnerable to climate change, and it was an awesome event. Lots of folks showed up, and we're excited to be a part of it, and excited to see what else we can do. And I think Wilson was talking about actions, and there definitely are a variety of types of actions that happen in the UN. So like that was more like, that's not actually creating conflict or tension. That's not what I think a lot of people think of when they think about actions. And that's more like creating an environment that is bringing up an issue, reminding people of an issue, creating space for a more progressive option to be pursued. So it's just, I think, opening space in a lot of ways, and that is different than I think the notion of direct action or actions that a lot of folks have. And those actions are also a part of what we'll be doing and what we do as Sustain Us, but not yet. So long-winded, but really awesome action. There's pictures online if you want to look at 0 by 2050 is the hashtag, or go 100%.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing all that, Maria, and giving us a sense of what Sustain Us is doing and the action that happened yesterday. I'm curious to hear from both of you what some of the energy is like being in Paris, and what is it like with all the people that are joining and congregating and being in one big place. Yeah, what's the energy like, and how are you all feeling? Phyllis, I'll turn it to you first.
Okay, so one of the things that I've been noticing in Paris is that the whole climate change like notion, like the whole world can come together in this like district of Paris, and it's just super beautiful. Like it's so beautiful how everyone has a common goal. They're all trying to get involved and find a way to let their voices be heard. And like I was talking to someone from the Marshall Islands who was telling me by 2050 they're already 4 feet above sea level, but by 2050 they'd probably not even exist. I mean, it's just like a great, vibrant, because like it's so great to see developed nations talking to developing nations kind of about what they can do, which is, I think, is just amazing. It's not the whole kind of, yes, there is an economic gap, but you know, we want to help them. It's that kind of vibrant scene, which I like.
So for me personally, it's just, I think, along some similar lines. I've been really excited by the opportunity to see groups coming to this work from very different motivations, very different intentions, also very different understandings of how change happens, but also recognizing that we want a lot of the same things to happen, and that in these 2 weeks we need to, one, get the best possible outcome from that, like actual negotiations and the treaty text and the very like wonky policy side. So like we do need that, and we need to collectively work together, both the people inside the negotiations, those who are in the like green zone, which is a non-badged area right outside of the negotiations, people who are in Paris and not part of negotiations at all, and also like around the world. So all those people have a hand in pushing for that best possible agreement. And beyond that, we need to come out of the negotiations knowing that we got something, but also that we need a lot more. And I think creating that narrative is something that, as a movement, we need to be really focused on in order to move forward strong. And just based on the type of energy I see here, I think there's a lot of hope for an outcome from Paris that is good. But I guess what I'm trying to say is just, I think there is a sense of realism about what is going to happen, and I don't think that there's too much like optimism and unfounded optimism. I think that people are grounded in the understanding that there are some good things that can happen. There's also a lot we need to be doing across the board in Minnesota, in the United States, with our Congress, with a lot of different areas to make real stuff happen. And I think we have just a really, really crucial, we're at a crucial moment of needing to create a story that's saying, yes, we're doing great things and we need to keep going. Just based on the energy here, I think that can happen.
So one thing that a meeting that I kind of went to add on to that, which was super interesting, was that Ban Ki-moon like extremely shaded the developed countries. He was like throwing shade on them, saying, "You're gonna have to give up stuff, guys. You know, you're gonna have to give them like developing nations money. You know, you guys can't be stingy." It was really great to see how the UN Secretary General is dealing with all this and kind of telling the nations that have a lot of money that they're important. I mean, that the developing nations are important too, and you will have to give up things.
Yeah, so I was just curious to give maybe a couple minutes for people to type in questions. For those who are watching, it looks like we have a couple people that are watching and joining us live, and want to give some space for folks to start asking questions and to see where the dialogue goes and to see how we can build some of the questions. So if we can take 2 minutes or so to write down some questions, and for those who are tuning in live, if you want to send some questions in our chat box, I believe you can do that. And if not, then we have some questions on our end right here. So we'll take a little 2-minute break and come back with some questions. All right. So we're going to come back and start some Q&A, if that's good with Philson and Maria. Great.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Great. So we have a couple questions, and maybe you all, both of you, can take turns maybe figuring out who wants to answer the question. And if people have particular questions for either person, you should name it. Otherwise, they'll just have to figure out who will answer it. But we're going to get started. And those who are watching, also feel free, if you can, to type in some questions. But yeah, we'll get started.
Okay, so my question, I'm Elizabeth. I'm from De La Salle High School in Minnesota, Minneapolis. My question is, how does Paris/France compare to Minnesota or the U.S. environmentally?
So how does Paris compare to Minneapolis in terms of, and when you say environment, are you saying like the vibes of the people, how they think, like what issues are present? Sorry?
Action and policies and things that people are doing to better the environment.
Yeah. I have some thoughts on that. Philson, do you have anything on that?
One thing that I've noticed is that the vibrant in Minnesota, it's the whole idea of climate and the environment is kind of, I think it's vibrant in Minnesota. The whole environmentalism is very welcomed if you're ever there for the environment. One thing I've noticed in Paris is that I was personally shocked about was that they had like posters about climate marches that they were going to have, but unfortunately couldn't. So they put their shoes there instead, which is like just to symbolize that even though we can't march, we're still with, I mean, the Pope sent his shoes, Ban Ki-moon sent his shoes. Like, it's just, like, I think that it's amazing, kind of. And kind of like how Minnesota is. Minnesota does have a really great, and we have a governor that listens, and in Paris, France, the president listens. So I think in some ways it's kind of similar, but obviously the governor isn't the president. So, and the president of these states also listen to what we have to say, kind of, especially when it comes to climate change.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly do not know a ton about French politics and how things are going in France. I know that we are doing an action next week about fracking because there's a bunch of local leaders from the United States who are going to be in Paris, and one of them, who's the governor of the state, I cannot say because of just action stuff, but like a governor who says he's doing stuff on climate is also continuing to push for fracked gas pipelines to be built. So similar to Tartan's pipelines in Minnesota, there are fracked gas pipelines all over the country and being built at a rate that's incredibly challenging to even imagine. Anyway, so there's like a governor coming, we're doing an action directed at him. And one of the things that we're specifically doing is partnering with French youth because fracking is actually banned in France because of health reasons, which is just very interesting and fairly unprecedented. I think on a different note, just going off of what Philson was saying about the shoes, I just want to add a little more context of what that was. So I don't know how much y'all know, but because of the attacks in Paris, this huge march that was intended to bring tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of people to Paris was canceled, and there was a protest ban put in place that said you can only gather in groups of 2, and if you do more than that, then you risk jail time of 6 days or more, and fines, and like on and on and on. So the planners and like amazing organizers had to really quickly and creatively figure out how to deal with this ban that was put in place. And one of the things that was came up with, along with a host of other actions that have happened, and in very just kind of, I'm not gonna say sketchy, like schemy ways, like how can we get around this ban and be really creative with how we're doing actions. One of the things that happened, which was what Philson was talking about, was there's this huge plaza that is like really a place that people gather a lot, and this organization of Oz, along with some of their partners, collected shoes from a bunch of their members. It ended up being, I think, 14,000 pairs of shoes, which are all being donated to. But they were all, I actually went up, so I went to this action, and we left our hostel at 4:30 or 5:30 in the morning to go walk to the plaza and help set up the shoes. So there's like bags and bags of shoes that people had donated, and then we like lined up the shoes, like the pairs right next to each other, and on this plaza had shoes representing like what could have been, and like the fact that people are still going to take space in the city and still are going to claim power in the city and still are going to build movement, like I was talking about, that we need to be building momentum, that is still going to happen no matter what the political context, no matter what the police situation. We're going to figure out ways to continue being heard as people.
Yeah. Are we muted? No. Okay. Hi, my name's Anna. I go to South High in Minneapolis. And my question is, if both of you could just help me visualize what this looks like when I think of the UN in movies, it's like a big room and no one leaves there for like 12 hours. So I'm wondering, like, what does it look like? And then also, like, is the youth involvement a new thing? Like in the past COP negotiations, has that been as big of a presence? Sorry.
I can do a little bit on what does it look like. So COP is huge. Like, imagine like this year the venue is essentially like 5 or 6 huge warehouses that, like, that's what it looks like from outside, is 5 or 6 huge warehouses, and inside it's a lot of like rooms that, like, if you imagine a press conference with like people, like a panel of people sitting with little mics in front of their face, a bunch of those rooms, a bunch of just like rooms with tables and chairs in them. There are booths like set up for different organizations. Like Sanis has a booth right now where we chill and do our work and then talk to whoever comes by. There's tables with free food and drinks quite often, which I'm not going to complain about. But essentially it's just like a lot of conference rooms, a lot of booths, a lot of I think it's not actually that fancy or interesting of a space. There's like some weird like decor things that they probably did spend far too much money on, like some weird statues of animals that are like plasticky stuff. I don't really know what's going on a lot of the time. Like they try to be cool and hip, and it's just like I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like modern art or something, but that's definitely what just happened, and it does not look good. Anyway, so essentially it looks like big warehouse from outside. Inside looks like meeting rooms with thousands and thousands of people in it.
Yeah.
So, do you have anything you want to add on what it looks like on the inside?
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed that it looks is just like the security here is very intense. We have a blog and I blogged about it, but it was just super, like, you go through these doors, you get your badge checked, okay, and then you go through another door, which is like a few steps, and then you get your badge checked again. Then you go through another area, and then you get checked, and then they direct you to like airport security style areas, and then you have to take out your laptop and all these other things, and then they check your bags through like this X-ray vision thing, and then you have to go through these metal detectors, and then after that you get your badge checked again, and then you go in the conference. I mean, security here is very, very intense. Every building, not like the halls, you don't really necessarily get security standing at the doors, but places like the meeting rooms that Maria was talking about with like the big microphones in your face and all that stuff, that is where they check your badges again, because certain people can get into high-level meetings, like party members, people who actually represent their countries can get into it, and I think me and Maria are like both observers, so what we can like watch them, but we can't really like be like, come on Indonesia, give this country money or something like that. We can't really we're not that cool, but we're cool enough to actually see it happen. And yeah, so I wanted to mention that as well. Also, the youth part. Youth have a great impact, but they've always had a great impact at COP. My teacher talked about since he's been doing this since 2009. Again, like how I mentioned with the T-shirts, how old will you be in 2050? That whole movement, youth has always had a great impact, especially in COP since 2009 in Qatar, Doha, Warsaw, Poland, Copenhagen, Cancun, all these other COPs that have been happening since 2009. My teacher has always mentioned how important youth are and how these delegates from different countries would love to hear about what we have to say.
Yeah, I just want to add really quick on the point of like we aren't like actually able to talk with them. I think so. We're not part of the like formal negotiating process. We're not like getting in front of the room and talking and negotiating what the text looks like. But like also in the venue, there are also just negotiators walking around, and like they're just like anyone else showing at the conference. So they also are accessible in a different way, where it's like you could just like be talking to someone on the bus that's like great, like shuttling people to COP, or you could be like waiting in line for lunch, and it could also just be like a negotiator standing there that you start talking to. So there still are also ways to have conversations with them and get to know them, and I think influence them potentially even in a more direct, personal way if you're having a conversation versus like sitting in front of a room arguing from a very like within a very limited political sense of like the negotiators don't get to actually say what they want to say, and that's like something that I've realized is like we've had a few meetings with the State Department from the U.S., so that's where the U.S. negotiators come from is the State Department. We've had a few meetings with the negotiators from the U.S. team, and like they're like really great people. They have very progressive values. They want a lot more than what's coming from COP2, and they're like people get so in the sense of like, oh, the negotiators are so terrible. The negotiators make these terrible choices. It's like that, like negotiators like don't actually have a lot of the power to make the decisions they think are best either. It's a lot about international politics. It's a lot about like the fact that for the United States, we like our Congress is not going to support anything that's legally binding, and because of how international policy works, anything that is actually international law would need to be approved by Congress. Like, so it's just like there's so much that constrains the actual negotiator's ability to do what they want, and I think that there are so many other ways in which we can both directly and indirectly influence them.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Yeah, you should let us know if you have questions too, and we'd love to hear, like what you want to ask us if you have any things that are on top. Otherwise, the rest of the folks here have some questions.
Okay. I'm Isabel. I go to De La Salle High School. And I was just wondering, as youth, do you feel like you're taken as seriously as the adults at the talks?
Wilson, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I could take that. So Maria might have a lot of things to say, but what I can say from what I have been when I would talk to other people and they would be like, oh, what organization are you with? Or I just tell them I'm a high school student, and then automatically they're just like, oh my God, in awe, and then they're just like, just staring at me like, but a lot of them actually would like to hear what youth would say. Again, like they will be probably dead and old before they see the changes and the extreme effects of climate change. And I think that youth do kind of have an impact there, and they do listen to a certain extent. I mean, like how I said, the negotiators aren't youth. A lot of them are just people in black, and this is what they do for a living, But I'm going to let Maria talk more about that.
I think I'm going to talk a little bit about Sustainus specifically here, and that how we've, I think I can't speak too much for past years, but how this year we've had the most influence. And talk a little bit about Sustainus specifically here, and that how we've, I think I can't speak too much for past years, but how this year we've the most influence. And talk a little about the here, and how we.
Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, I think it's good now.
Yeah, I just had another screen open because there was questions coming in from another window, the actual
Okay.
link that people are watching. So keep going. Sorry.
So you're good. I was just like, internet, come back. Okay, so with Sustainus, one of the routes we've chosen to go is working through a group called CAN, which is Climate Action Network International, which is a group of about 900 organizations from across the world who do climate organizing in some capacity. So maybe organizing is too specific because it's definitely like organizing, movement building groups. This is policy, this is politicians. It's a huge range of groups who are working on climate. And for the most part, it's not youth, and Sustainus is from the meetings that we attend that are CAN meetings, Sustainus is the group that's most consistently involved in those conversations, and I think has the most credibility with them. And I think for me, that's been one of the ways that Sustainus has the most influence, is working through CAN and trying to push CAN, which is a fairly on point organization, to be just a little further in the right direction. So because we do have credibility with them, we do we do have relationships with individual members, individual organizations, have built trust with them. They do take us seriously and do see us as crucial players in shaping strategy, and not in tokenizing oh, you're youth, so you care about the future, or you're youth, so you are very idealistic. But oh no, you're youth and you're crucial to this conversation and have a unique perspective and are necessary in this conversation. In part, yes, because we're going to be here longer than most other people on this planet and are going to feel the most severe impacts of climate over the long term. But it's still, that's still just a part of, I think, what youth bring. And working through CAN, I think, has worked really well for Sustainus in gaining legitimacy both from them, and a lot of members within CAN have good relationships with the State Department and other negotiating bodies from around the world. So it just gives us access to different conversations, different information, different people. And I think that's given us a lot this year.
Great. So the lagging was due to me checking the other link, and there's some questions that are coming in from people who are tuning on live stream with us. And there's a question for Philson from Liam, and Liam asks, are there many other high school students there at all? So awesome that you are. So Philson, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. So far, from what our school knows, is that our school is the only high school that is accredited from the United Nations to go to COP. Our school is the only high school. Last year, we got a school in Lima, Peru, the American School of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Last year how COP20 was in Lima, Peru. So when our delegation from our high school went there, we got to meet with the high school who was just how can we do this as well? So my teacher actually hooked them up with how to get to COP. So they're coming, I believe, tomorrow, and we're gonna meet with them. And yeah, so yesterday, I believe, I saw, or on the very first day, they allowed some high school students in, but they weren't really they can't stay for the full 2 weeks, But we are, because I'll talk about how we kind of got accredited. So Mr. Johnson, Craig Johnson, our teacher, what he did was that he went and tried to go through our school to get accredited from the United Nations to go. But since when he was all done, got all the paperwork in, the minute they found out that he was coming from a public school, they were like, oh, no, because they didn't want to have any ties, and public schools really get like funding from governments and all that stuff, and they didn't want to have any ties from any governments. So it's either if you're a private school, or since our school has a foundation and NGO, we can get accredited. We got accredited from our NGO, the School of Environmental Studies Education Foundation, to go to COP. So that's another reason how we got to even go, even after our school kind of canceled it, was because since it's separated from the district, we can still go to COP. And that's why our teacher couldn't go, because he's a worker under the district, if that makes sense. So yeah. And there's 5 of us, if you guys are wondering. There's 5 high school students staying in this hostel right now as we speak. All of them are jet lagged and tired, though.
Awesome. So we have about 15 minutes left with you all, and wanted to ask if you all had any questions for us. Otherwise, there's 2 other questions that we have right here in-house.
I can write this down, or you guys can write it down as well. Give a shout out to our blog. You guys can follow us on our blog. Add me on Facebook. My name is Bilson. Or Nicole has me as a friend on Facebook. She can tell you the details. And also, what I do is that since my school is also an environmental school, and all my friends are really interested in this stuff and what goes on, what we do is that I at least add a whole bunch of people on Snapchat pretty much, and people kind of follow my Snapchat story as I'm in the conference, and I take pictures about pretty much everything, and they probably think I'm really weird. So you guys should add me on Snapchat. I'll spell it out for you, and then if you're interested though, if you're not interested, then you don't have to. But
Just wondering what your name is. You should send it to me on Facebook, and I can send it off to the students that are here. And yeah.
Awesome. I'll send you a message then right now. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Do you have any questions for us?
Are you guys all seniors, or are you guys juniors, seniors? I remember him, the guy in the blue shirt.
Yeah.
I remember him. But so you guys are juniors, seniors, sophomores, freshmen, I'm guessing, in high school? Where is he? What grade are you in?
I'm in ninth grade, so I'm a freshman.
You're a freshman? Oh, awesome. Super cool. Start young.
Yeah. So I'm gonna call on Simon to come up and ask a question. Maybe we can do a closing. But yeah, fun.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Simon, and I'm wondering about the 0% carbon emissions by 2050. I'm just wondering what that includes and what that would look like.
So it's not just carbon. That's 0 emissions, meaning we're not burning any fossil fuels. We're not using any fossil fuels because that is not in line with what we need climate-wise, or what we need for health, or protecting land and water rights, indigenous rights, any of that. So it's 100% emissions gone, 0 emissions by 2050, and 100% renewables. And that's within not just the electrical grid, but within transportation, within agriculture, within everything, which is seemingly really ambitious. But when we look at graphs of what we actually need to stay below, these are to stay below 1.5 degrees, but if we have any chance of 2, we just which is more broadly accepted, we need, actually scientifically need to do that. So it's everything. And I think what's been intriguing about this campaign, or this part of our work with 0 by 2050, is that we do include the piece of 100% renewables, and that's exciting to me, because I think too often within climate and environmental work, I think especially within a lot of the more recent youth work, it's fighting bad things, which is like really, really, really important. And I love fighting bad things. But it's also really important to think about not just how or like what do we envision, but how are we getting there, because we're not going to wake up and once we get to zero carbon, we're going to, or zero emissions on whole, we're not just all going, like there's not just going to be solar popping up everywhere. We need to have that be a transition and start building it, and really building out that plan of how we get there is the only way it's going to happen. And so that's a part of it that I'm excited about that I think is different than some of the other like fight the fossil fuel industry campaigns that I've seen.
Awesome. Does anyone that's watching online have any questions? I finally figured out how to access the questions that folks are sending in. If anyone has any, we'd love. Yeah.
I also just wanted to touch on the other two things that Sustainus is working on really quickly. Is that okay? Like besides so I did not say that at the beginning. And so the first one is the 0 by 2050 and 100% renewables. The second one is loss and damage, and more broadly human impact. So what are the ways in which people are already being impacted by climate change, and what are the policies that we as a world are going to put in place to support them? So that can be financial contributions to countries most impacted by climate change. It can be tech transfer, so making sure that clean energy technologies are passed on to countries who need it. That can be talking about immigration policy and how when forced migration happens and is happening, how we're making sure that that is supported and people have a place to go and we're not closing our borders. So like loss and damage is like very comprehensive of what that could include. And then lastly, human rights and equity language, and specifically intergenerational equity, which is the notion that future generations need to be considered when making decisions about climate and about where we're headed together. And a way that I like to think about it is it's not just like giving it a moment to think about future generations, but it's like actually more analytically saying like what would this actually look like for someone like a generation or two from now, and would they be in a place that I would be comfortable saying like, yeah, we can make this decision knowing that that's going to be the outcome. We know that that's the reality that person would be living in. Would we be comfortable with that? And that's, I think, not just giving a second to that thought, but really more comprehensively thinking about what that, and comprehensively and critically thinking about what that means is more what I think of when I think about intergenerational equity. So those are three things: equity, loss and damage, long-term goal.
Thank you.
So we're going to take one more question, and maybe if y'all could figure out and or close in the next 5 minutes, and then we can have a closing thought about moving forward, what you all are doing, and what that's going to be looking like in the coming weeks.
Sounds great.
All right. Hi, I'm Owen Cody, and I go to De La Salle, and I am a freshman. My question is about what energies are considered renewable, because a lot of energies can be considered renewable, and a lot of energies can also not necessarily be great for the environment either. So which ones are considered in these talk?
Nelson, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could talk, I'm not like a guru, but I can talk about what I know. I know that wind and solar are considered renewable. I mean, my friend is super interested in dirt, so what she does is that she looks at, she goes to meetings that talk about carbon sequestration, which is the whole idea that we let out these emissions or carbon out and then putting it back into the ground. But since it's now considered, carbon's now considered a pollutant, you can't really bring that back from the atmosphere to the ground, which is another way. That's kind of all I really know. It's a cool question. I wish I had my friend who's really interested in that stuff would know I'm more of a negotiation, environmental policy kind of guru, but that's pretty much all I know. Sorry if that doesn't help.
Specifically, is nuclear involved? Is that considered renewable or not?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not. Nor, actually, I don't know about at the UN, but in a lot of places, like large scale hydro is also not. It really depends on what it is or like who the design by is. But I think, and I think this actually gets at one of the pieces that is weird about international policy and like the negotiations is like all this will actually be implemented at a country by country level, like at the largest scale. Like most of it will be cities or states or regions that really are implementing this, and that's when I think about how this ties to organizing is that we need to also be in Minnesota ready to articulate what we need as Minnesota. So what are the energies that work for Minnesota, and how do we want models set up in Minnesota to support what we need? So I don't. Most of the time, it doesn't get into that specific of like, are you talking about large scale solar? That's still like the same corporate model as big oil, or are you talking about community based solar? And it's more like the idea of 100% renewables, and definitely not including nuclear.
Cool. All right, so we're gonna do closing and get a sense of kind of where you all are going right now. And so if you can walk us through the next coming days and what that might look like for you and ways that we can follow along, that would be awesome. Let's start with Philson and then go to Maria.
Okay. All right. So one thing that I would say that or like to tell you all is that there are countries that are very focused in coming up with a deal. A lot of these countries came into this COP21 with the whole idea that they're gonna get something out of this. So I don't want to like leave with like a pessimistic view. I have a lot of hope that I personally, we all would be able to live through this meeting, and it being written in the textbooks that this is the time that the whole world agreed to, or not Antarctica, but the whole world considered actually getting into and doing something about climate change, that at least we tried. And yeah, please, I sent my Snapchat to Nicole, so keep in touch. I mean, I can also send her your email and all that stuff. I'm a huge extrovert, so if you guys try to like talk to me in any way, shape, or form, don't hesitate. I'm not really shy at all, so I'll be willing to talk or get in contact with any of you guys. I love Yemen. I love the climate generation. I love everything about it. So please let me, please keep me in the loop about what you guys are doing and stuff like that. And also, I'll keep you guys in the loop as well.
Great. Thanks, Wilson. Let's hear from Maria and we'll close out.
Right.
Well, it's going to be one hell of a next week. That's what I can say right now. Not getting a lot of sleep. But on a more real note, I think I am optimistic that there can be some good things that come out of the negotiation process, but I think in the bigger picture, what I talked about with building a sense of energy and momentum within the movement moving forward, on December 12th, the day after the negotiations are done, there is still going to be a big mass action in Paris, so I'm really looking forward to that and how that fits into the picture of really articulating and highlighting the narrative of, yes, COP happened, yes, some good things came from COP, but also COP is not all we need, and here's what we're going to do to keep energy moving forward. So big action on December 12th is keeping me going. Also, just knowing that there's going to be all kinds of fantastic actions happening all along the way that are really highlighting the gaps between what is happening and like the real decisions being made and what ideally would be decisions being made. So I excited for that, and we like joke within our delegation that we like don't actually talk about the text that much, and then when we do, we're like, yeah, we can't wait to see the text. But then like, of course we can't wait to see the text. Like that is like a huge part of why we're here, is like to see like what can we actually achieve. And it's weird that we're like waiting for this just like piece of paper to be like, here's the text, it's done, and that will happen in the next 2 weeks. And kind of weird to think that all of a sudden it's just gonna be like in writing and magic there.
Great. Well, thanks for giving Yaman a shout out, Filson. We would love to see you here back at Yaman when you get back from Paris. And Maria, the same for you. We'd love to have you join us sometime at one of our meetings. And really appreciate you all giving your time to hang out with us and to share about your experiences and share some stories about on the ground what's happening and what you all are doing through your respective groups. And I also want to thank those who are watching online and joining us and adding in some questions. And yeah, we'll follow along with all of the information that you all just shared on the side.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And
Bye, Jenny. Bye. Oh wait, we should take a screenshot. Oh, they all left. Okay.